welcome to Talk Time. As a matter of fact, this is the first recorded Talk Time program in the year, and we're going to be looking at issues that hinge around national development and planning. You're welcome to Talk Time.
Water. Let's drink the new. For bulk, call 020-379. Your water, our water.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Time. And as I indicated from the very beginning, we're going to be talking today about national development and planning, and perhaps the National Development Planning Commission. What has it done in the past? What is it doing now? And what are the prospects for the future? And we are particularly privileged to have in the studio with us Dr. Kodjo Essein Mensah Abrampah, who is the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. So you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Now, when we talk about the National Development Planning Commission, what are we talking about?
Thank you very much. The National Development Planning Commission is one of the few constitutional organizations, which implies that its origin is from the 1992 Constitution. There are very few executive institutions that are mentioned and instituted in our Constitution. The National Development Planning Commission is one. You also have the National Civic Commission, and then also the National Electoral Commission. So these are very, very important institutions. That's why they are embedded in the Constitution. And their functions, respectively, are also outlined in the Constitution. So if we pick our Constitution, the Article 86 and 87 are all specifically on the National Development Planning Commission. The composition of the Planning Commission is very, very important, and these are specified in the Constitution, which includes some of the what we call the members who are already originally mentioned in the Constitution: the Governor of Bank of Ghana, the Minister of Finance, which are statutory, and the government statistician. Beyond that, there are also ministers who are also appointed by the President to be members of the commission. And then what makes it quite exciting is that there are also regional representatives who are appointed by the respective regional coordinating councils to also serve on this commission. So every region has a representative. Currently we have 10, and we're going to have the 16 very soon at our first meeting this year. And then besides that, we have experts who are also appointed based upon their knowledge, their skills, their experience to also serve on these commissions, who might include engineers, planners, sociologists, psychologists, renowned economists, civil society representatives, private sector representatives, who are all appointed to be members of this commission. So that is the composition. And what are they supposed to do? The first function is that they are supposed to advise the President on all matters related to development policy and strategy. This is very, very important. And in the Constitution, this is right, the 87.1. And then 87.2 are also specific activities that ought to be undertaken by the Commission, which includes, the first one is to make sure that there is a national medium-term plan which is prepared by this Commission, requested by the President, Parliament, or by its own powers given by the Constitution. Besides that, the National Development Planning Commission is also to ensure balanced development in the country. Balanced in terms of location, that all these regions have their respective requirement resources to be able to develop, and then also balance in terms of gender, balance in terms of the various areas of the economy, so transportation, infrastructure, social services, and all that. And besides that, we are also supposed to ensure that the environment is protected, and this is specified in the Constitution. And then also we are also supposed to help in the spatial planning of the country, and this is very, very crucial, to make sure that there is always the juxtaposition of some of these facilities so that we can optimize the use of these resources that we have in the country. And then we are also supposed to coordinate, monitor, and evaluate all development activities within the country. And this is a very, very huge task which has been given to this commission. We are also enjoined to undertake studies and researches to be able to advise the president and the government on some of the future prospects and areas that we can explore for our own development in the future. So these are the key functions, and we have, by way, develop our own tools and also other activities which are routine. And then also each year we come up with some of these innovative specific activities to also enhance our relevance and visibility in the area of development policy and development planning. That's
first difficulty. There's a commission which is supposed to advise all presidents.
Yes.
And presidents have different worldviews. Yes. How is the commission able to function in the light of the fact that all presidents are not the same in terms of their worldview?
That is it. This is very interesting. But let me say that planning has two major ingredients, political and technical. And the ability to do that as a commission is to ensure that there is really a harmony in terms of the interface. Why am I saying that? Yes, in terms of where we want to get this country to, there is no debate about it. We all want to have a prosperous, a developed Ghana, where each morning everybody will have the opportunity to have 3 meals assured for the day and be able to obtain the necessary services for their own development. And if you look right from Nkrumah's day to today, what are the areas that have been specified in our own plans? We want to have a very good, well-managed economy. That's one thing, nobody disputes that. We want to have a situation where agriculture is modernized. There is no doubt of that, from 1951 all the way to today. We want to have also a transformed industrial sector, which has been the view of every government. We also want to have a very accessible and adequate social facilities and resources. Nobody doubts that. Education, health, housing, and all that. And then we also want to have very responsive and very effective institutions that will create an environment for all of us to experience that comfort. And most importantly, also have established governance institutions that are predictable. These are some things which we have in almost all the governments ascribed to that. And therefore, the difference for us as a commission is the how. And this is where it changes from government to government, vision to vision. So for us, building upon our experience and also our technical acumen, we help in shaping these hows. If a government indicates, and that is required from our constitution, 36(5), that as soon as you are elected as a president, you bring about your vision, what you have for the country, and it's a requirement. So once we receive that vision as a commission, we advise on that. This is possible, this is feasible, this cannot be done within 4 years, and therefore you might need to face it. This is something that you can only do when you negotiate that way. So that becomes our responsibility, and that is why technically we pick this vision, give it a technical expression in what we call a medium-term development framework. So the framework becomes more or less a pact where the technical and the political ideas have been harmonized. That is what we bring out to the various sectors and the district, and also express that in their own plans. So some things are basic. They might not change from government to government. Some things might change because of the new vision and direction. And in order then to make this abrupt, that is where the National Development Planning Commission helps to settle it well, to fit both into the national trend and also the international environment. So that is it. But the basic thing is that this technical political interface must be managed, and hence the National Development Planning Commission.
You would appreciate that maintaining the neo-colonial capitalist order is substantially different from building a new society on the basis of socialism. So all the aspirations cannot be the same.
Yes, definitely. And let me say that, yes, the colonial pattern might be that they have a capital source which is outside even the country and is linked up to it. What we did after independence is bringing this development and trying to organize it internally. This ascription to this capital source which is outside now is not there. How do we bring it in? And if you look at the 10-year development plan of Nkrumah from 1951, this is basically what it did. And this is a tremendous beginning where the country really took a surge. And this is where relevance was given to planning for the first time in our whole history.
Are you talking about the Atta Louis plan?
Yes, Atta Louis plan.
Because there were three development
exactly. Which
plans.
road?
The Atta Louis plan.
Yes, exactly.
The 5-year development plan, the 7-year
development plan. Yes.
Which of them are you talking
I think
about?
I'm talking about the Atta Louis plan, which started from 1951, which had basically a structure which I would say we haven't gone very far from that, even for all these 60 plus years, because that set up the base for all this infrastructure, education, health, housing, and all these have been basic. And why did it become so influential? Influential because it had a whole stretch of a period for it to be implemented. You realize that the other plans subsequently, the 5-year development plan, 7-year development plan, they don't have that time for it to experience its real implementation. And if we could give any credence to planning in this country, this is one where it started, and it made a lot of change in our country. It gives us a concrete change from the colonial era to a new era where we had to take care of our own destiny. And this was well done: agriculture, industry, social policy. And you could see it within the phase of 7 years. There was a drastic change in the country. And subsequently, we did not have the opportunity to continue with that, because subsequent ones were short-term plans which were truncated either through military rule or other things, until way up to where we started these economic recovery programs and structural adjustment program, which also had a span to operate. But the difference of that is difference between the period of 1951 and then from the structural adjustment is also the emergency that came around these structural adjustment plans. It's like you've gone very down and you want to come up suddenly. And therefore there were a lot of knee-jerking policies which were undertaken that time. And you realize that even with that, because it had a stretch of a period for it to operate, it was necessary for us to give us a burden, which took us out gradually from the poverty situation onto the culmination in 1992, where we had also the governance aspect, the institutional aspect to support it. So it's not just having plans, but also a system that could support it and implement it. And you could see it if you look at our poverty reduction figures. It tells you straight away, 1951, according to the income poverty, 52% of Ghanaians were considered poor. By 2000, it has reduced to 36%. And then it went on by the end of the two Ghana poverty reduction strategy programs. It had gone all the way down to about 25%. So it tells you that if you have a long period of systematic planning with solid institutional support, you could see a drastic fall in poverty and an improvement in our own life situation. So from 2000, there was also the Ghana poverty reduction strategy, which aimed, and I always ask myself, was it socialist inclined or capitalist inclined? Because this is a combination, a real combination of social protection policies, which really wanted to bring the poor and the very poor to come up to the level where they could experience some comfort, and they would take up an economic surge themselves. I had the opportunity to be part of those who worked on the Ghana Poverty Reduction Strategy 1. It started just from 1991 with the technical work and culminated in 2000 when a new government was elected, and we had the chance to also really strengthen it and bring it out as a plan to the country. And one of the things which fascinated me, and this was more of a property-owned government elected, but in the strategy, I remember they asked us, look for the most vulnerable groups in the country and let's see how you can bring them up. So that tells you this is Ghana. This is not just being at the right or the left. This is Ghana, and there's a problem to solve. And we went around the country, did a lot of work, and came out to what we call the 13 vulnerable groups. It included, we had locationally, so we did a lot of concentric circles. Locationally, we realized that the 3 northern regions and the central region were most disadvantaged. Then we went on in terms of work. Who are the most disadvantaged? And we realized that the most disadvantaged were subsistence, small-scale farmers in most of the rural areas, and also at the coastal areas, fishermen. We went around in terms of gender. Who are the most vulnerable? It's basically women, and then people with disability. So we looked at all this and came out with the 13 people. One of the groups which was interesting at that time, which were identified, were former cotton farmers who were producing cotton to feed into some of these industries, and the industry had collapsed, and therefore they had to shift drastically from producing cotton to something else. And I'm sure they took a right turn, because today there's a response. A lot of them went to the production of watermelon. And these are people who were identified at that time as vulnerable groups, for which the poverty reduction strategy targeted at these people and gradually took them out of the poverty by providing economic opportunities for them, real social protection so that they don't fall out of the sieve. And some of them were even given support so that they could participate in some of these political situations. Some of them became assembly members through this process. And today, I'm sure a lot of them are active. And that is why poverty could reduce from a 37 income level to 25, drastically within that period. And I ask myself, when I read through some of these literature, is it a capitalist or socialist approach? No, I call it a Ghana approach, and it really worked.
Ghana approach.
Yes.
Now, you describe a situation in which all of our governments appear to have the same objectives. And they appear to have also the same constitutional institution, which is responsible for coordinating development and advising on development and so on.
Exactly.
In these circumstances, why do we bother to change governments?
It is very important. And as I said, the question then is the how. We provide the bigger terrain, they all have the same objective, but the how might be different. The how is the tactical day-to-day approach. And every government is also influenced in terms of their decision. So the National Development Planning Commission provide choices and alternatives. And it's up to the government, influenced by their own conviction, by their own experience, and many of them toured the country 2, 3 times before they become presidents. And therefore, they've seen it in their own prism. And they bring all these things to bear and make the choices. So the choices that the president makes among these alternatives are things that we also go on to implement. And therefore, I always said election for a new president is also a means to also make a choice ourselves. So if we make a choice as a country, we are definitely saying that given the alternative provided and the choices that a particular person might make or a government might make is why we are electing so and so to power and that to power. So
therefore,
yeah,
it may not be wholly true that all governments have the same objectives and they want to achieve the same things. They want to achieve different things.
No, let me put it this way. They will have the same goal, they will have the same objective, but the how to achieve these objectives are different.
Some governments would want to build socialism. Some governments would want to build property-owning democracy.
Yeah.
That's substantial difference.
You see, it might be in terms of, you see, there's one thing, having it as an ideology and then having it empirically on the ground. I have taken pains to look at the development decisions of many of these governments. And if you look at them, and that's why I say that it is their choices among the alternatives. So that comes down below the ideology. And that is where the ideology comes in. My choice that I made. And there are so many of them. Let me just give a very practical example, which we have all debated over a very long period. And I'm just giving that an example. It doesn't mean one is right, one is wrong. That's it. You see, we all wanted to have free education, for instance. And you'll be surprised to know that, I know that you are not surprised because it's something that you have said several times. Since independence, only 15% of our population have attained secondary education. With all the magnificent things that we've done since independence, all the government trust schools and all the good things that we've done, only 15% have enjoyed a kind of secondary education in this country. And therefore, the point is that given the experience we've seen in many countries, both outside and in Africa, and some of the poor countries we can talk about, which we were even better off, Tanzania, Rwanda, all of them had this huge surge because there was an emphasis on education. And therefore, there was a need for us to have secondary education supported. That was basic, and you could see it in the print of our plans, almost all of them. But the how is a choice of the government.
The how was the same for all the parties.
Yes, yes.
All of them ended up implementing progressive free SHS.
Exactly. So now you see that there is a upfront load by the current government saying that it must be free for everybody, which is a little bit different from saying that, okay, let's do it incrementally. So that is their choice. I'm saying
that the how was the same. All of it eventually came to doing it piecemeal.
Exactly.
For first years, for second years, and for third years.
Yes.
All didn't happen at once.
Exactly.
Yes.
So my argument is that, yes, there is one which says that, okay, let's start from here for everybody. There's another which says that, okay, let's start for a number of them, and then we'll move on as we work on the process. So these are two, just a little different.
That's what I'm disputing.
Yes.
All of them said, let's start with some people. Yes. And as we advance, rope in a lot more. Both the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party.
But I think that I saw the two approaches, they were different in terms of the approach. In terms of, because I saw a situation where one says the whole class go free. The whole class is free for 1 year, for first year. There's another who said part of the class will get it. And that is
not true.
Is it not? Because no, I in my own
the
personal...
NPP in its campaign said that it was not going to adopt a piecemeal approach, and that it was going to introduce fee-free education at senior high school level for everybody.
Yes.
Eventually, they ended up doing it piecemeal, like everybody else said.
So let me take it this way. You see, I look at it not from the perspective of the campaign. I look at it in terms of the empirical situation. And I saw it myself. I paid fees for 14 people before that. The following year, I did not pay any fee for those that I helped in entering first year. And that is the difference.
But second years were paying.
Yeah, second year I paid for them, yes. But then, subsequently...
So it's piecemeal. The point I'm making is that both parties advocated
but different approach. It's not the same. It's never the same. Paying for 14 people and not paying for the 14 people the previous year are not the same.
No, because by the next year... The second year had also kicked into the program. So it was still piecemeal. In the first year, if you had students in the second year, you would have paid.
Yeah, I had students there, but I paid 40 instead of 28. Because the previous, the year following...
So the approach is the same?
No, it's not the same, because I paid for 28, I would have paid for 28, but I paid for only 14.
Yeah.
So
because it was gradual.
Yes. And it's different.
And all of them had a gradual approach.
Yes, we had definitely. I don't disagree. It's a gradual approach, but the approach is different, and the effect on the citizenry is different, and the outcome would be different. So that's how we see it in planning terms, technically.
Okay. Now, how long are you able to plan for?
Yes.
2 weeks, 6 months, 7 years, 200 years. How long are you able to plan for?
Thank you very much. It's a choice. but the choice is also guided by our laws. If you look at our constitution, it is a requirement for a president, that's what we have in our constitution, for a president to present his or her vision to the people 2 years in office. That is a requirement. So the next requirement is that we also need to prepare a medium-term plan, which is also there by 87.2, I think is the A or B. And then these are the requirements. But in practical terms, and from our experience, it's always good to have a perspective, or what I would like to term it a vision. We use the term perspective or vision because we don't want to contravene what is there in the Constitution. The Constitution specifies plan, and the reference to that is the medium-term plan. And the medium-term plan is 4 years. Okay. So what we do practically at the National Development Planning Commission is to have a perspective which gives you a longer period, 25, 20 or so. And it's learning from our history. So we have this Vision 2020. And if you look at the Vision 2020 document, it was a 25-year perspective. Okay. Somebody asked me in town, why was it not called Plan 2020 or so? I said, well, it's couched very well to not to contravene what is in the Constitution. So it's a vision, it's a perspective, which is very important. Perspective means that you are doing what we call projections based upon assumptions, and then based on our own aspirations, what we aspire to attain as a country. And this has been there. If you look at 1951, the plan, what we talked about, it gave a lot of aspirations before going into the medium-term specifics. It gives those aspirations because our projections are also limited by assumptions, influenced by so many factors. It may happen or it may not happen. Again, our database is often limited. We are building it thanks to the computer, but it has always been limited, even now. And a lot of projections, therefore, are not as expected, okay, are not attained. But now we're doing quite well. We have a Ghana economic model which we've tested and is doing very, very well in terms of even mimicking the past and then what has been attained. And if you look at the Vision 2020 as a perspective, it gives very nice painting of our future, of areas related to the economy, human capital. It was very specific on urban development, rural development, and also the environment for development. These are the 5 areas that it talked about. And you'll be surprised of what we have attained today and what was projected that time. They said that the aim is to have a growth rate. At that time, it was around 4%, a growth rate of around 8% by this time. It talked about, in fact, tripling our GDP. At that time, it did that. It talked about improving access to water and sanitation and housing at that time. It talked about creating an environment of freedom. It predicted at that time where it would be convenient for individuals to enjoy and they use the word relax and recreate their own lives. It talked about modernizing agriculture, where we can apply all those things, and also industrial development. What are we experiencing today? The growth rate that they predicted was just around that. The GDP it predicted was just around that. In terms of water, for instance, there's a huge improvement. About 85% in the people of Ghana, according to our statistics, now have access to potable water, which is fantastic. We still have a challenge with housing. We still have a challenge with sanitation. But if you look at it largely, this prediction, which was done 25 years ago, and gradually we've come closer to it, if not gone, even beyond that. So that is perspectives. So that's one of the things we do. At the National Development Planning Commission, a similar thing was done just 4 years ago, 3 years ago, in terms of looking at a 40-year perspective. What Ghana will be at the time of our 100 years of independence. What picture of Ghana that we want to see. So a lot of data was collected, a lot of documents were collected, a lot of predictions were made based on some of these assumptions. Let me say that with the coming of this government, the president announced that we're going to review that so that it doesn't become just a perspective without thinking about how this could be implemented, because the president had the first opportunity to do the first medium-term plan in response to this long-term plan. So it went to a review. I had the opportunity also to be part of the team that looked at vision. So it went to a review, and I must say that had it not been this busy schedule in January, definitely the president is going to speak on it very soon. What is going to come. We have it done. Technically, we've done the work. We've reviewed it. We've brought in some of these new ideas and new views, all incorporated. And then once he gives his assent, we'll begin to do dissemination and what we call validation. Then it goes around it. But let me say that the medium-term plan, which the president prepared, had a lot of information from this medium-term, long-term perspective. And what had been brought in is the how, which might give a different perspective, the medium-term range. So that is what we do, a long-term perspective. From the long-term perspective, then, a president, once elected in office, that becomes a constitutional requirement. You have to bring your vision. So your vision might be influenced by the long-term vision or might be aside, but we need to harmonize that process. And if you look at the long-term vision, this is not a document which is out, so I cannot speak much about it. But I am sure that it will not be very far from all these things that I mentioned we've done in the past, given the 10-year development plan of the past, the poverty reduction strategy. The medium-term framework, coming from this perspective, then gives expression to the president's vision. The president, this is your vision. This is our long-term plan or long-term perspective. Let's see how we can harmonize that. So we do that. And then we say that given your vision, these are some of the alternatives as a government you could pursue. These are the choices you can make. And the commission is supposed to advise. So that is the word, advise. Then the president and his cabinet will pick it and give the elaboration and all those things. That reflects in what we call a medium-term development framework. The framework is then carried to the various sectors, the various ministries and the district who come out with their strategies. So let me bring out another area which I'm sure a lot of the public is not aware. The medium-term plans of the various ministries and districts are pulled together. And in every year, before we initiate the budget process, the National Development Planning Commission comes out with the annual priority areas. So we pick all these, pull them together, develop an annual priority areas, and this is what you need to look at for this year, given the plan. Given that plan also responds to the president's vision and then the long-term perspective. We put it there. That is what goes into the budget. Some of them go to capital, some of them go to current and routine expenses. And that is how it is done. The capital usually gives a new direction, indication of the new direction. So where the capital funds are going indicates to you where the government is emphasizing. So this has been the plan, a long-term perspective, a medium-term vision which is expressed by the president. Let me also add that from experience, this is where national development planning becomes very important. Instead of making we know that the president is elected for 4 years. But in terms of the vision, we support the president to make it 8 years. Tactically, that's what we do. So you have an 8-year vision, such that if you are re-elected, you still have your vision pursued without necessarily we going back to the table and then do all this. So all that we could do is to review and tinkle. And this is from experience. So that's how we do it. We are not enjoined by the Constitution to make it 8 years. But technically, that's what we do. But we are enjoined by the Constitution to have a 4-year medium-term plan. That is it.
Well, viewers, I hope we all agree that we're having a very interesting conversation on national development planning and the commission, which is charged with responsibility for doing that. And we've been talking to Dr. Kodjo Essein Mensah Abrampah, who is the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. We're going to go for a short break, and when we come back, I'd like to find out This is a country which is not able to make projections beyond 6 months. How can planning be relevant and realistic in this circumstance? Short break.
Hey, Bukuya. The thing on all the pressure to me to say, what tongue come from? You said the people na ya na sa o yare ko. They said when you Joe one, what to ha wusu ni. Ma nya osanka between me kaba. Ma, we yare na menya anu aduro. Nti na ma me to nkra fra o se bra no. Eh na be say fen ya kwa. Kwese wa ma me ye ma hye me. Ko fichira. Wa ya se na ya na ye o ya me. And na se wukunu.
Well, welcome back to Talk Time, and we are having a conversation with Dr. Kodjo Essein Mensah Abrampah, who is the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. Now, sir, here is a country which is not able to make valid projections for 6 months. How then do we do planning, medium or long term?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me say that predictions we do, and we make quite good predictions. I just shared with you the thinking and perspectives way back in 1995, and they're virtually hitting to the dot in the year 2000. Why? Because they were able to predict that growth rate, for instance, in 1995, estimated the expected growth rate in 2000, and we're hitting that. If you look at the vision expressed way back at the time, it was even looking at how the issues of access to water, sanitation, and housing will be resolved. And by we got closer to that in terms of these figures. Projection is a science, and you require a lot of data to be able to do it accurately. In the past, our data analysis, data management, data access had been a challenge. Let me say that, even for the commission. Why? Because we had to rely a lot on the Ghana Statistical Service data and even some international data when it comes to some areas where it is not available, especially even now, area information on the marine situation where we're dealing with, specifically with some of the targets. It's even a challenge. But the Ghana Statistical Service has improved a lot, substantially. And you could say that even today, they announced the population census that they are going to conduct in June, and they are not going to do the usual manual paperwork, which you make a mistake, cancel, but they're going to go by real high tech, where people pick it the information and immediately it is sent to the headquarters and analysis begins. Let me also say that we had also had a lot of these prediction problems because of delays. You do this whole census, and it takes even about 5 years before you can get real information coming out to know the characteristics of household before you begin to work on it to plan. By the time you get this data and do all this analysis and be planning, it's already late. And then by the time you use it and you're about to implement it, it's outmoded. So this has been the challenge. But as I said, Statistical Service has improved drastically. The other area which they have also improved, and it's helping us a lot in planning, is the adoption of what we call administrative information. So you don't have to wait for a census. You don't have to wait for a survey. But as the information comes up, it comes straight to the planning. They do the analysis and bring the information straight to us so that we can make predictions. So you don't have to wait for 5 years to know how many people went to Kolebu. You don't have to wait for 5 years to know how many people went to hospital in Tamale, teaching hospital. But the administrative information, as they're doing and collecting the information regularly, will immediately come to the planning outfit for which we can use it to plan. You don't have to wait to know even the economic output of farmers if you're able to do this regularly, because they pass through checkpoint, they pass through markets, and all this information, if collected regularly, could give you ready information. We live in a real-time world now. If you go and do business, the businessman, already 1 month information is dead. So we have also organized ourselves to be able to do that. In the past, let me say that we've done that on assumptions. Now, many of these assumptions are becoming a reality. because you can have the information from international sources or locally, thanks to the good work that Ghana Statistical Service is doing. So National Development Planning Commission, we also have a system which is now going to interface directly with the Ghana Statistical Service and the Ministry of Finance, which we'll call NEMIS. This will receive a lot of support from the Ghana government itself and the World Bank to build. This NEMIS, the National Monitoring and Evaluation and Information System, will pick information right from the districts. So as the action takes place, it comes up. It goes to the respective ministries. It comes to National Development Planning Commission for information to be done, for analysis to be done. At the same time, the Ghana Statistical Service is also picking this administrative information, analyzing it as it comes up, and then we picking it up. So committees have been set up. We are working on it, and some of the tests that we have done is very, very positive. You realize that more and more accurate predictions of our growth rate and other things are being done. And if you look at it, for the last 4 or 5 years, the deviation is almost about 0.2 or so. And then when it is in the middle of the year, we're able to say that, hey, we are almost there. And then if you look at even the predictions at the middle of the year and end of the year, it is almost always on the exact. And these are some of the issues where we have improved a lot. Based upon that, you can do more deeper projections. The medium term becomes quite accurate. The long term becomes very, very good in terms of the assumptions. And this is how we've been managing. So we are improving upon our situation there. We even have what we call the Ghana economy model. So what we have done is we put in all the information, figures in the 1960s, 70s, and all those things, and then looked at some of what really happened and did projections, and it gave you almost exact information. We now have it being used. Last year we did a test of it. This year it will be functional, which means that we'll be able to say that if agriculture grows by this will be the effect on the people's life. And then if it's not able to grow by that, this will be the effect. If the industrial sector grows by this will be the effect. And then go deeper into the industrial sector, which will be the composition. If you look at the composition, this is electricity, this is power generation, all those indicators within the industrial sector will be looked at. Manufacturing, all those things, and play around some of these figures with these assumptions. So we'll be able to do that. All these assumptions, if they go through, we'll give it this figure. If it doesn't go through, this will be the deviation. And then we do that. We can say that if oil price, for instance, increases by this level, this will be the growth rate, because it's going to have this effect on these areas. And these are the models which we are playing around at the National Development Planning Commission to sharpen our tools such that we can make prediction more realistic. And that is it.
Now, in spite of all that you've said, over the last 20, 30 years, the assumptions in our annual budgets have not stayed valid for more than 6 months. That's the reality.
Yeah. Let me say that it has improved over time.
But we're still within the 6 months range.
Yes.
We make assumptions at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
By 6 months' time, we cannot validate those assumptions anymore.
For many of them, we can, because the deviation is not much. The deviation is not much, Kwesi, in terms of its effect. Because, for instance, if you look at agriculture, it had always hovered around 2% for a long time, sometimes even going to the negative. We managed to move out 3%, 4%, and it's been holding. One of the areas which has been a challenge, and it's almost always a challenge, is the industrial projections.
I see you are emphasizing the gross domestic product and those statistics, but there are others that we are ignoring. For example, the parity value of the city.
Oh, okay.
You understand?
I get that.
If you take 1983 as the base year, the city has been devalued by more than 30,000%.
Exactly.
With monumental impact on the living standards of our people.
It is.
GDP may be rising, but there are other indicators that you need to look at.
Yeah. It is true given the nature of the economy, we talked about it right from the beginning, the structure of the economy, it is always difficult to make certain projections when it comes to the value of the currency, because it is very dependent on international factors, very, very dependent on international factors. And therefore, our ability to hold our predictions depends on the ability to insulate the influence on international factors. And that is why the National Development Planning Commission has been emphasizing a lot on building the local economies. Because once you're able to build the local economy, which makes it cyclical within, you insulate yourself from the international influence and the outside influence. And this is exactly what we're trying to do.
There's another problem, this over-dependence on gross domestic product. It doesn't tell us the whole story.
Well,
for example,
yes,
if you take 1972-73 as the base year again,
yes,
you come to realize a huge decline in Ghanaian participation in mining.
Okay.
And you will also find a huge decline in national revenue.
Yeah.
And yet, if you look at the contribution of mining to GDP, it's not declining. So now you have a situation where mining, gold mining, for example, you know, contributes only 1.7% of total export values to the economy. And yet, if you look at GDP, it gives you a distorted picture.
Let me say that these are key economic indices, which tells you the pattern of our development. You see, and as I said, it's one thing generating the growth, and one thing asking us who actually takes the benefits
from the growth.
Yes, they are two different things.
But who benefits from the growth is far more important for us as a country than the level of growth that is generated.
And it definitely, this is where we've been doing a lot to fix that, because it reflects eventually in the life and the pattern of the people. So if you look at what we call the local content law and the acts which have been passed recently, all of these are just to give correctional measures to some of these areas where there's a disparity between the growth and the benefits. So if we have a lot of these local participation, then if there's a growth in the sector, the local people benefit. And as I said, that's why we are emphasizing a lot of that. For instance, one of the examples I always give is the discovery of petroleum and gas in the Western region. I saw it myself, how the people were so elated when the discovery was made. And everybody was trying to, you know, see how they can find themselves in. Unfortunately, when this whole thing started, a lot of them got disappointed. Disappointed in the sense that it demands new skills. It demands new knowledge. It demands all these new experiences and even ability, for which a lot of the local people could not fit into that. And therefore, a lot of gains, but totally, and once the local people did not fit, it also affects the country in general.
And above all, our total interest in oil and gas is 13.5%.
Yes. That can be taken up in so many forms and increased in so many forms. You'll find out the emphasis. For instance, one of the skills which are required there a lot is welding, middle level skill. And if we can train the number of welders that are required in that sector alone, I tell you, the number of youth job opportunities will explode. And the action has been taken immediately. Some people have been trained abroad. Others they've an establishment. The Ghanaian has established a training school in Western region where people can do underwater diving and all those things.
But sir, is this not the problem?
Yeah.
We have oil and gas.
Yeah.
It belongs to us.
Yeah.
And we are happy that our welders are working on those fields.
Yeah.
We own it.
Yeah.
It belongs to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not sufficient to have your welders working there.
Yeah.
Our total stake is 13.5%. Yeah. That's a huge problem.
Yeah. I think that, you see, it's an investment. We always forget the part that somebody is also investing, they're also risking, and they also require a certain portion of the cake, of the dividend. At the end of the day, what we have to do is aspire to increase it. Besides these welders, there are a lot of Ghanaian managers there who are also working. But the whole point is that we should create a point where there's a whole bunch of Ghanaians gradually taking up the heights. It started in Saudi Arabia and all those places. They started with outsiders, but now they've taken over. So we must now vigorously, we are planning towards that. And if you look at the sector and what all of us are doing is to make sure that much more is gained from that than the 13%. But I tell you that it's now going up. The percentage is not just 13. 13 is just a portion. If we build all those things that we are getting in terms of taxes and all these gains, it matches up to about 40%. And I'm sure that if we all get to know how this has been rising, then we'll all give the support so that we can push towards getting more to the heights. It is also a challenge. It's a risk. Because as you push to get more, the person who has invested is also pushing to get more. So it's a dialogue and really creating conditions for who we can demand more. But you should not
be interested in the dialogue. You should be interested in maximizing our interest.
Exactly. And
as for maximizing the interest of the multinational corporations, that's their business.
Yeah.
Our business is to maximize ours.
That is it.
Yeah.
And that has been the trend, in fact, so far. That is it. Because a bare 13% to about 40%, it's quite a big gain. And I'm sure a time will come, we'll put our hand on our chest and say, hey, here we are, we own it.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, viewers, we are talking to Dr. Kodjo Essein Mensah Abrampah, who is the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. And we are talking about all things development, we are talking about all things planning. I hope all of us are learning a thing or two. I'm learning a lot, sitting here this time. But we have to go on a short commercial break. And when we come back, I'd like to find out how much elbow room we have in our planning and development, given the fact that we have institutions like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and others breathing heavily from our backs. Short break.
Hello?
Oh, Sisiana sound.
Okay, why? Hey, my wife comes and send a message you. Hello? I didn't know what's happened?
It's a child who will be a quiet say what? I dare say,
Miss I friend, I'm so here too. My wife is not testing messages here. And our office also, I'm trying to tell you, man. She says, I
mean, so we a guy manu, and may young who could look ra. And also wants a family drilling company limited for Kana.
What's it then? Family Drilling Company Limited.
Ye two borehole, biofuel, biogas, swimming pool, plumbing works in Naso, ye be, Frey 0240-333-111, and NASA 0244-144-822.
Miampa and net. You want swimming pool on me see? Me want to, you'll be here. Family Drilling, I want Family Drilling. Me out with that.
I grew up in Kwame Nkrumah's hometown.
Oh, okay.
Well,
hello and welcome back to Talk Time. And today we are talking planning, we are talking development, and we are talking the commission, which combines development and planning. Now, so we've set up the National Development Planning Commission. Nice name. But you have the International Monetary Fund, and you have the World Bank, and you have the other agencies virtually telling us what to do. How much elbow room do you have for planning?
Definitely we have a lot. And I always say the country belongs to us. And if we want to own it, we own it. And definitely we are owning it. You see, these international institutions and World Bank, IMF, the United Nations are all there to see to the good of mankind, all of us. At the end of the day, it's your relationship to them which also indicates whether they will dictate to you or not. And it also depends on how prepared we are locally. That is very, very important. I say that Ghana Statistical Service has improved very, very much. And by doing that, what they're doing, that we are turning out our own figures of reality. If you don't have the figure, somebody will produce a figure for you. But if you turn out your own figures and you are also predicting your own development pattern, all that the international organizations can do is to support and guide. And you could see that by and by, this weight, which used to be the case in the past, is going off. Why? Because we are also developing technocrats who also understand these very institutions. I worked for United Nations for 10 years. So I know everything practically about it. There are people who have worked with the World Bank at Ministry of Finance, people who are there who have worked with the World Bank 20 years, IMF, the same people. They worked there, some of them became directors. Directors implies that sometimes they are even higher than the country officer here. So given all these experiences and a bunch of them, it's not just one, two, it's a bunch of them. So there's now a better understanding of the relationship that we need to construct with these international institutions. If we're well prepared ourselves with all these plans, then it becomes you bringing what you think about, your advice. If you don't have a plan, and if you don't trust your own planning process, then the person can say that here I am. This is what you want to do.
But you could also have a situation where actually the plans we are drawing are identical to the plans that the IMF and the World Bank have been bringing. So in that case, they object to nothing because you are doing their work for them.
It's basically not World Bank or IMF, and I know.
Haven't we become more dependent
on
since 1966?
Well, let me say that, yes, part of it.
Heavily dependent.
Yes, part of our cost.
We are the third largest importer of tomato paste from Germany.
In the world. It is true. It is true.
We depend on Burkina Faso for our raw tomatoes. We depend on La Côte d'Ivoire for plantain and contombre.
Yes, yes.
We are a net importer of fish and so on.
But the pattern has changed. It has changed drastically. It has changed. Changed because this year, I am sure anybody who brought plantain from Côte d'Ivoire will hit the back, will go back with the plantain. Because there are people within our own country who are taking the plantain to the market and going back home with them. So if you bring it for Côte d'Ivoire, you will not have a market.
So do you buy plantain from the market?
Yes, I'm a plantain farmer.
Oh, do you patronize plantain products?
Yes, a lot. And I'm a farmer, plantain farmer. I love
kelewele.
Yes.
And yes. I buy kelewele regularly.
Yes.
And the size is dwindling. And the kelewele fryers will tell you that it's because there's a shortage of plantain.
No. Whoever says that might not be going to Abobloshi.
The people who are listening to us, they buy kelewele all the time.
Might not be going to Goso.
Can you believe that now you can buy kelewele, 5 cedis kelewele? It's never happened. 5 cedis of kelewele.
That you see, we have experienced one of the lowest inflation in terms of food in the country for about a decade. The lowest.
Masa, you know.
Because look, we bought a bunch of plantain selling at 5 cedis on the market.
Where?
In Accra and Abobloshi.
Masa.
Yes.
Masa.
Yes.
We are sitting.
This is reality.
From here.
Yes.
From here.
Yes.
I would like to drive with you to the Domi market just here, and you go and buy a bunch of plantain for 5 cedis.
No, Domi,
it's not true.
You see, Domi might be. You see, let me say it. There is a pricing factor and a marketing factor. Taking it from there and bringing it, the person might create his own market environment to be able to sell it at a higher price. But we have an average price which is used, and basically in Accra they use a population market to check the foodstuffs. And I tell you, Kwesi, you can get a bunch of plantain for 5 cedis at Abobloshi. And even below.
I live in Accra too. Many of the people who are watching us live in Accra.
Yes, at a point in time it was even selling at 3 cedis.
A bunch of
yes. Yes.
Where?
In Abobloshi.
I would like to go to your market. I certainly would like to buy from your market.
So
your market is so far away from mine.
No. It is, maybe. But that is a reality.
But you say you buy kelewele.
Yes, I do.
How much do you buy? When you go to buy kelewele, how much do you buy?
Well, these days you can buy 2 cedis kelewele and eat. And that's it. If I have friends, then we can buy 5 cedis and share. Yes.
I bought some yesterday, and I ate it alone, and I bought it for 5 cedis alone.
You see, and that's why I say it's a pricing factor, it's a marketing factor that the person has created. But on the average, food prices has really, really gone down drastically. Food prices this year have gone down drastically. And I tell you, our problem now is to make sure that the farmers even get a good price. That is a problem now for us.
Is it true or not that the method for calculating inflation has changed over the last 3 years?
Well, what we've done is that they've been now new more goods added
So
on.
it has changed.
Yes, in a way, it has to be. It has to. Inflation method has never been static. It varies because there are new goods added.
So let me find out if we're using the same method we used in say 2014 to calculate inflation, would we be getting the same figures?
It is possible. You see, it's economics, I must say, and economics is behavioral. The goods which were important in the past will not be important today. If you bring those same goods onto the market, nobody will buy.
The question is a very simple question.
Yes.
If we were to use the method for calculating inflation in say 2014 or 2012, would we be getting the same results we are getting now using this new method?
Let me put it this way, Kwesi. If you use the same method will give you the same results. It's the ingredients, the element, because what we have done is the same method, but new elements have been introduced.
That changes the method.
No.
The goods that go into the basket for calculating inflation have been increased by more than 100.
Yes, the goods have increased. Why? Because
so the method has changed.
Because the demand for these goods also changed. The goods in the past will not be relevant. For instance, marset. Those days was quite important. Slide rule was quite important, but you can't use slide rule as a basis for doing anything today.
Agreed.
There are new things.
Agreed.
So you add on the new and the relevant things, which is the computer, which is the phone.
I'm not disputing that.
Yes.
My question is very simple. If we were to use the same method we used 5 years ago today, would we get the same results? Very simple question.
You will not get, because they are of different value now in terms of the goods. Those same goods are of different value today. So the method might be the same, but
so when we boast about reducing inflation today, and we don't tell the population that we are using new methods for calculating, we are not being wholly truthful.
No, we are, because the method is the same. The only thing you have done is
when you have introduced more than 100 items into the basket.
Yeah, because those goods are relevant, more relevant today, that you need to add on. In the past, there were nobody talked about.
And then also you forget about the rebasing of the economy, which is also another methodology.
No, rebasing is something that you need to do because the same reason.
I'm not arguing about that. I'm just saying that isn't it possible that we are comparing elephants with apples?
No, not at all. Because we communicate this and relevance. That's how economics is, because it's human behavior. So human behavior means that something which was of value yesterday will not be of value today. And therefore you must change the pattern. Again, the economy is also expanding. We did not have anything like a huge, giant telecommunication sector. We did not have it. Now we have it. And therefore, the calculation of the economy in terms of its activities must change. And the changing implies that you need to rebase. It's not a hidden thing. And for the transitional year, you always see that we make reference to both the rebase and non-rebase, so as to help us in order to move from the old to the new. But to stretch it over all those years, that is where the challenge in economics becomes difficult, because human behavior has changed. And now people were more, for instance.
That is why economics is not like chemistry.
I like that.
But sometimes they make it sound like chemistry.
It is not. And therefore you always have to explain. So economics has a lot of notes to it, because the notes gives you the assumptions. And anybody who interprets a figure must look at the assumptions. It's very important.
Now, sir, you are the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. You sit in a very strategic place. How do you see the future of Ghana if you have to continue on this trajectory?
Yeah.
How would our future look like?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me say, and with optimism and confidence, the future is good. Definitely, and I'm proud at this stage to be a Ghanaian. Why? Because, yes, we are getting things right, and we're moving from a time that we're not bold to really embrace and solve some of these problems to a time that we ought to be bold and embrace and say that here we are. These are some of the things we did not do well. These are the new direction. These are the things we've done well, and these are the new directions. Why? Because we're now more and more looking at how we can develop the country through what I call an internal cyclical economy, rather than looking at elsewhere. So you hear things like, and these are things which you might have heard way back in the 1951 and the 60s, but they are becoming a language today, an integrated aluminium industry. This is something which we thought of some time ago, wanted to develop. We started and ended somewhere else. We need to push on. We're talking about building gold refineries. These are things we talked of so many years ago, and yet we are talking about it today.
Actually, Nkrumah built the gold refinery. It was almost 90% complete when it was overthrown. And for close to 50 years, the machinery and everything is lying in the bush and rotting away.
Yeah. So we're talking about it today. A refinery in the offing to help all of us.
There's one already. There's a refinery.
No, that's Atakwa.
No, there's a gold refinery at the airport.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And there are new ones which are going to be built in addition to the one in the airport. Additional ones which have been announced already. So we are there. We are getting to the point. We're talking about a situation where a lot of our primary goods are seeking to have an industrial response locally rather than looking elsewhere, so that we become more competitive, which I'm very happy about. We're talking about a situation where we are moving from these embedded thermal energy sources to think about alternatives. This is crucial. And if we don't do it now, the mark will leave us. So these are things, if we begin to talk about these things, it means that we are really finding answers to some of these things. And beside that, we're talking about, developing our rural areas, which is very, very important. It's not just rural turning into urban because of population, no. But rural based upon production, looking at how agriculture to be moved to the next level, so that you can proudly call yourself a rural farmer. Unlike when we did the vulnerability studies way back in the 2000s, we're identifying all these people as vulnerable groups. Have we been able to move them? And I can say yes. So that brings us up to look at the future. What makes me even more optimistic is looking at the development pattern of some of these countries, which started with us, left us, and now we are catching up. What did they do right? Okay. Are there stories for us to pick? Are there indications of areas where we need to emphasize now? And that's exactly what we are doing. And even now, countries which were far leading and are now going ahead of us, how do we work on? The Rwanda, the Tanzania, the Ethiopias. How did they get it right? And we are looking at all those areas where we can also push along. And I'm very happy personally because I could see a stronger link between planning and budgeting, which is something which has eluded us for some time. And now we established a very strong link. Anytime we've been able to do that in this country, and the history shows, stronger link between planning and budgeting takes it off from the development mark to just going by the normative process to a big jump toward development. And we've seen it in the 1950s, 60s, in the early late 1980s, and then 1990, early 1990s, and then the strategic development program. So you see stronger link, the Ghana poverty reduction strategy. And all those ones, one unique thing is the stronger link between what we intended to do and where we put our resources. And we're doing it now. What we intend to do and where we put in our resources. And that gives me a hope that there is a future for our development, no matter what.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, viewers, we were in conversation with Dr. Kodjo Essein Mensah Abrampah, Director General of the National Development Planning Commission. And you heard him. His ending note was that there's a lot of hope for us. Let's hope so. It's goodbye from all of us at Pan-African Television, from the director of the show, Mr. Edem Luma, from the producer of the show, George, from cameramen, from makeup artists, from everybody. Please keep your dial on Pan-African Television because we bring you the best in everything, and there's no doubt about it. See you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.